Regularly scheduled Tuesday, May 28th, 2019 Shelburne Selectboard meeting, which I now call to order. Before we begin, I'd like to speak to you a few minutes about a loss in our community. Last Wednesday, Thomas Bear Chauncey Little, the son of Tom and Susan Little, passed. To Tom, our esteemed moderator, chair of the Ethics Committee, and valued community leader, Susan, their immediate and extended family, we offer our sympathy and ask that you observe with us a moment of silence in his memory. And for that, we thank you. The next item on the agenda is to approve it. We have one change, and that is we will table item 8 to our next meeting, which is June 11.
Move to approve as amended.
Jamie moves to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Mary seconds. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing no hands. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Colleen not voting for reason of not being present. The next item is to approve the Select Board meeting minutes of both May 13, which was the retreat, and May 14, which was our prior meeting. Why don't we take May 13 first? In which case, is there a motion?
Move to approve the Town of Shelburne Select Board retreat minutes dated May 13, 2019.
Mary moves to approve.
Second.
Jamie seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, including, I'm going to assume, Colleen, who has just arrived and approved the minutes of May 13. The next item, the next minutes are of May 14. I do have one quick comment, and that is the spelling of Karen Metzger with a T or a D? D.
Yes.
In which case,
That is an unusual
gotcha,
Metzger.
okay.
but thank you for catching that.
Are there any discussion of those minutes?
Move to approve Shelburne Select Board minutes of May 14th, 2019.
Jamie moves to approve.
Second.
Mike seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The next item are public comments. And is your, excuse me? We're in the habit of getting a comment from Ruth Hagerman. And while I will quickly turn to you, I was just looking around to see if Ruth were here. I don't see her, in which case, would you step up for us, let you know who you are, and
Sure.
would you, you're on worldwide global television, so.
Thank you for having me. I'm Sharon McNair from Black Willow Lane in Shelburne, and I'm here tonight with Lisa Veer and Jim White, also Shelburne residents. And we're here tonight because we're concerned about a family of beavers who are building a dam on Webster Road. And we realize the town may at some point be called to take action, and we were just here to provide some really quick information about humane, effective solutions and to offer any help that may be useful to you. More and more towns are very anxious to get away from lethal methods of handling wildlife. Wildlife is very important in Vermont, as we all know, and the public certainly, agrees with that. And so one of the solutions that we're going to talk about is a beaver baffle. And just so you know, this is not a new thing. It was reported back in the Stowe Reporter in 2007 that by then already over 100 successful installations had been in place throughout the state. And it's important to note that killing the beavers It will not provide any kind of a long-term solution because the beavers are there because it's prime beaver habitat. If you remove those animals, more animals will take over, and it'll be a never-ending problem. So, in fact, I'm going to put my glasses on because I am going to read you a fact, and I want to make sure I get it right. Okay, so there is plenty of statistics and data showing that killing the existing animals has only a 16% success rate over any period length of time, especially in the long term. And the solution we're suggesting has a 97% rate, which is using a culvert baffle device. And the use of the conibear traps, which is a way that they kill the animals by drowning, is very indiscriminate, and people's pets can be killed in them. And it does take a beaver up to 20 minutes of struggling to die, which is a terrible way to go. I'm not myself a beaver expert, but I'm here to advocate for the non-lethal humane solutions on behalf of my organization, which is Green Mountain Animal Defenders. When it involves beavers, we collaborate with Vermont wildlife experts, including John Aberth, who is a Vermont licensed wildlife rehabilitator for the state, and Skip Lyle, who is a wildlife management expert and a beaver enthusiast. In the interest of time, I'm going to leave a few handouts for you to, peruse when you have a moment. And I'm also here to offer the town a consultation by one or both of these experts, for them to help you determine if any action is actually needed, and if there is, to suggest some fact-based ways to handle it. And Green Mountain Animal Defenders is expecting, based on by estimates from other similar projects that we've worked on, to be able to fully fund that for the town, so that we're asking you to consider this as a gift away to the town, and so it wouldn't cost you folks anything, or the town really anything at all. So we're hoping that you're going to consider that, and I'm going to leave you my contact information and get back to me with any questions. And also, we'd love to know what is the next step in this process. Okay, thank you for your time.
Well, we thank you.
Sure.
Just a quick question, and it's a reminder to myself. A beaver baffle would guarantee flow, no matter how busy they are. That's the general idea.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I included a photo of what it looks like.
because they can be some kind of busy.
Yes, they are. That's
Yeah.
why they call them busy beavers.
Well, thank you. I'm sure Lee will respond to your offer and comment further. Thank you very much.
For you to just give you guys the handouts.
Sure, please. Lee, can I ask, have we heard from other residents? Have you heard from other residents?
This is the first I'm hearing about it, so it's helpful information.
You know,
Thank you for
There's
being
one of these
proactive.
for everyone, including you.
Thank you.
And then this, I thought, they're really kind of quick things, so I thought you could share these. Pretty easy.
Thank you.
very much.
Great.
Thank you, Jim.
all.
You want to comment? Yep.
Hello, Jim White, Hillside Terrace. I'm also a member of the Vermont Wildlife Coalition and a lover of wildlife. And I just want to say a couple of words in support of Sharon and Lisa's proposition here. Basically, what we're asking is that the town take a more proactive approach to dealing with wildlife issues, which is, basically the direction that conservation is going in. The traps that Sharon mentioned that are typically used for dealing with beaver have actually been condemned by the American Veterinary Medical Association as inhumane. They're also not effective and unnecessary because the beaver baffles have proved so useful. So the only other point I want to make is I was reading in the town plan, Chapter 2, Natural and Scenic Resources and Land Conservation, and it seems to me that the beaver baffle approach is much more consistent with the language of the plan, which I'm sure you guys are quite familiar with. I won't quote the sections that caught my eye, but I could certainly email them to you if you wanted to take a look at them. And I think, the vision in the plan really supports what we're asking for today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Any other comment, any other discussion? Josh?
Well, I'll just add one since I know something about this. So I'll just comment on the traps that they were talking about, that if anybody's interested, I was a co-author on a scientific paper that actually demonstrated the ill nature of the euthanasia that is with the coney bear trap. So if anybody needs that information, I'll be happy to provide that.
Thanks. Well, I'm sure Lee will seek all of you out as resources, and we'll come back and discuss this at our next meeting. Thank you. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Any other comments? Hearing none. The next item are select board comments. Mike, did you want to make one about Tom's son?
I did want to speak to Tom and Susan's loss. I had the pleasure of working with Tom on the ethics committee, and anybody that knows Tom, his reputation precedes him. He's an outstanding individual. And I was, his commitment to the town and his commitment as a leader in the town was demonstrated on Monday when he was leading the festivities or the celebration at the Memorial Day event, which was pretty impressive to see. So I just wanted to extend my sympathy as well. It's a really hard loss.
Thanks, Mike. Mary?
I too was saddened by the loss. Tom is not only great here in Shelburne, but has a reputation as an attorney in the bar that I belong to that is equal to his reputation here, and I'm sure it's a loss for the bar as well.
Colleen?
Just to echo the condolences to the Little family, and then also to speak regarding Memorial Day. And I know that many of you have heard me talk about my family's commitment to serving our nation, and personally know of family and friends who have lost people who have been in service in our military, and so just want to extend thanks to any and all of us who are able to appreciate that. And thank you, Pete Gadju.
Jamie? No comments. I'd also like to speak a little bit about yesterday's ceremony at the Veterans Memorial. We were blessed with beautiful sunny weather and significant attendance, and we have many people to thank for it. And in no particular order, but simply as I remember them, those include the community school wind ensemble, which played beautifully. We had the support of the Shelburne, Heinsberg, and Charlotte Rotary. The Scouts of Troop 602 were a key part of the ceremonies. We've mentioned Tom, who had a role, as well as Reverend Mosier, and importantly, Sam Feidelberg and Colleen Haig of the committee, who were the geniuses and the hard labor behind putting it all together. And not least, if I've forgotten anyone else, please forgive, but not least Colonel Ockert, who not only was the master of ceremonies for the occasion and in some ways its spirit, but who was also recognized for a long and distinguished United States Army career. And we thank all of that effort, as well as the salute to all who served. It was a pretty great occasion, so thank you. Are there any other select board comments? Hearing none. Lee, the next item is the town manager report.
Thank you. Just a few quick updates. Stormwater being an important goal and objective for all of us. The Stormwater Advisory Committee has been reactivated. We had our first meeting about a week or so back, trying to come up with some strategies that might help address the issues that were raised in our public hearing, and with the goal again of bringing a version of the ordinance to you by late fall for hopeful adoption. We also had a first meeting of the Fire Rescue Property Steering Committee, and we'll have another meeting next week. And that process of land analysis is underway. There may already be or will very shortly be an application to the DRB for a sketch plan review of a conceptual plan for both healthy living and the town to see how those might fly.
Are there, sorry to interrupt, are there minutes taken of the steering committee?
Absolutely.
Are those posted?
So they should be, yes.
Okay,
Yep. So we're running that as you would expect as a
right,
public entity with all the proper notice and minutes
Great.
keeping.
thank you.
As far as the library and historic town hall project, Ruth is away. She's not with us this evening. The portico bricks on the front of the historic town hall have been completed. The floor has been refinished inside the building, lots of repainting, lots of trades continuing to work inside those buildings, lots of progress well underway. The sewer line project, Falls Road, is trying to be wrapped up. We may have to go back in there and redo some of the grass areas alongside the road that got washed out during the storms of these past few days, the endless rain we're all dealing with. But we hope to have those roads repaved not too long from now, but can't predict exactly when. But most of the work's been done. There's 2 homes that still have some work to be completed off the road. Again, as everyone else did, thanks to all who helped with Memorial Day ceremonies yesterday. It was a very moving event, an important community event. Farmers Market, I trust, went off well. I wasn't able to be there for it, having been with the marathon team all weekend. But things are moving along in town. Thank you all.
Life is sweeter on Falls and Bacon, okay. It'll be another meeting or two, I guess, before we get a
Not perfect.
resounding.
Not quite
yeah,
yet.
Yeah, we're
trying
not
to
quite
get there.
ready, I guess.
Lee?
Yes.
We had talked about an economic development meeting. Did we get a date scheduled?
We have not yet set a date for that, but Jamie, maybe you and I can
We should
talk
sync
together
up
and
on
get that
We have
planned.
some potential
Okay.
speakers and moderators in mind who we were trying to confirm availability for.
And we're still thinking June.
I think we were looking at June, July, right? As an
Yeah, I
option.
would think July,
Yeah.
more probably.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
The length of notice is a pretty serious obstacle
Yeah.
to putting a program together, and
Yeah,
so,
Thank you.
thanks.
any other questions, Lee?
Lee, when will your new hire start?
New hire, I am very pleased to say, will start next Monday, June 3rd.
Hey,
Her name again, I'm sorry?
Nini Angers, lives on Wild Ginger. Very much looking forward to having some help in the office. Help for all of us, but
well, we're happy for you, we're happy for her, and she'll be quite welcome. Any other questions? Hearing none. The next item is to introduce Joe Duncan, who is the new Executive Director of the Champlain Water District.
welcome.
Anywhere that's approximate to that mic, which you'll have to,
Yeah, you can take the mic right out of the stand
Yeah.
and hold it in your lap.
and let our large viewing audience know who you are, and that'll help.
Hi, I'm Jim Fay. I'm presently the general manager of the Champlain Water District. I will be retiring June 28th, and our board has promoted Joe Duncan to be general manager effective July 1st. Joe comes to us from the private sector, was a consulting engineer in the Chittenden County area for 18 years. He's been with us for about 3.5 years now. Originally hired as our chief engineer, director of projects and programs, was promoted 6 months ago, or
Yes.
to a third title of assistant general manager. And through the search process, the board promoted from within. And Joe, again, will be taking over July 1st.
You're welcome. Would you
Yes.
like to?
Thank you.
tell us-
Yes, I look forward to continuing working with Shelburne. It's great to have Lee on board. We've worked very closely with Rick over the years, and
Sure.
we continue to do the same going forward. So happy to be here. Happy to be following in Jim's footsteps, and we'll be in close communications with Lee and Rick as we go along, as well as your water board. So we work closely with them as well, and our plan is to visit them next Monday during their next meeting. So happy to answer any questions that you guys may have on where we're at. I know we sent out a little packet on who we are and what we do. Happy to answer any questions you have, or leave you to what looks like a very full agenda this evening for you.
Pete, you want to comment?
Great to work with these guys. Continuity between us and the town is great, and keeping them abreast, and they're a great bunch to work for.
Great.
Thank you. If we do have questions, you'll hear them.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes, certainly we will.
Definitely.
And whatever we can do to help, we're as close as this and eager to, so
Great.
don't
Yeah.
hesitate to ask.
Yeah, communication lines are always open, and it's been a long history of that. We'll keep that going.
And congratulations to you.
Thank you.
To you both.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, to you both. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Thank- Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great
thank
evening.
you. Thank you, Joe. The next item is an executive session that was originally scheduled to consider proposals for solar panels on the new library. That item, for those of you coming in a little after we began, has been tabled to June 11, and we will not be discussing that tonight. The next item on the agenda is state stormwater permitting, and we have the benefit of the town attorney and to take us through the process by which the state DEC permits, issues or issues a general permit.
So good morning, or good evening, everyone. I'm also here with Attorney Christian Chorba in our office, who's done a significant amount of research on this, so there may be points where I'll have Christian chime in. So I think the question, as I understand it, that you've asked us is to take a look a little bit at the differences between the MSGP and site-specific permits, and to kind of give you an explanation of where that stands right now in the state's permitting process. So for those of you that are familiar with the MSGP, it's a general permit for stormwater that is for particular industrial activities that is handed down through the EPA. So the state, Vermont's DEC is a delegated authority, and that permit is issued, it's a general permit, so you can apply for coverage under that multi-sector general permit. That's what MSGP stands for. And that is distinct from a site-specific permit insofar as a site-specific permit would particularly deal with a specific use on a piece of property, a particular type of industrial use, and they would have an individualized permit tailored to whatever activity it was that was going on that particular piece of property. So that's kind of the general difference between obtaining coverage under the MSGP and getting a site-specific permit. So the MSGP, ordinarily, when you apply for coverage under the permit, it's a five-year coverage cycle, and that MSGP has expired, and it expired, I think it was November of last year, right?
It was supposed to expire in 2016, but it's been continued as they're drafting the new MSGP. So that 2011 MSGP is still in effect, but the new one is expected within a few months.
So they do have a draft permit that's out for the new MSGP, and we have that if anybody wants to take a look at it. They had said that this new permit was going to be issued already many times over, and it hasn't been yet, but it's in draft form. So the expectation is that, I think, 2 months they said? Maybe? It's kind of what they're...
They said within about 2 months, but they were also saying that about 6 months ago. So it's a bit of a black box right now. I've been in touch with an environmental technician at DEC as well as a staff attorney, and they've given me a bit of an overview of where the draft is. It's currently going through legal review. It's at this point, we're well past any public comments. So when that MSGP is issued, again, they're saying within a few months, but who really knows? That will be the final MSGP. At that point, they're expected that sites that are currently covered by the current MSGP will have 6 months to reapply for reauthorization. And at that point, when a specific site reapplies, that reauthorization can essentially be challenged, and there's a 14-day window, so it's a short window to actually challenge the reauthorization between their application being so-called administratively complete.
So they have 6 months.
Correct. So they'll
From the time of the issuance of that MSGP.
Right. So new MSGP comes out. Sites have 6 months. Once they apply and are administratively complete, there are 14 days to challenge the reissuance of an MSGP to a specific site. Those challenges can come in the form of written comments as well as a request for a public meeting. And if you do want to challenge the reissuance of the MSGP to a site, it is very important to do that within the 14-day window, because even if that challenge is unsuccessful during that window, in order to have standing to actually appeal the reauthorization to the environmental court, you have to have challenged, you have to have submitted written comments during the 14-day window.
How many would you estimate, if we don't know exactly, multi-sector general permits do we have in Shelburne? How many have been issued? Do we have a sense?
I mean, I think there's dozens, but I don't know the exact number.
And they're all on their own schedule?
No, so I mean, yes, they would expire at different times, but because there's a new permit coming out, everybody who has coverage under the prior general permit needs to reapply.
I see.
Because there's a new permit.
Can you hold a site-specific permit and not hold an MSG?
No, you're asking, you get coverage under either one, and most industrial activities are going to be covered under the MSGP. Because it's a generalized permit, it's obviously more advantageous to be covered under that generalized permit. So you're going to try to conform with that general permit than it is to have a site-specific permit to whatever activity you're doing on your particular site.
Do we expect that there would be notice from the state about all MSG permit holders and the process that under which they're undertaking renewal?
Not necessarily, no. So you may get the town clerk is going to get notice, but you're not going to necessarily get a notice that says, okay, your 14-day window starts now.
So we'd have to maintain a list that identifies all current permit holders. Will that 14-day period apply to all of them who are renewing?
It's 14 days for comment from the time that they have become administratively complete. So they have 6 months to reapply, and then once they reapply, there's a 14-day
So that period will be staggered.
Right. It depends on, somebody may reapply right away. Somebody might take a little bit longer to reapply. And so you can request notice within a particular geographic area, not for a particular site, but you would get, it's a general notice, right, Christian?
That's right. So the DEC runs what they call the Environmental Notice Board, the ENB, and through that ENB, you can sign up to receive notice. I think it's generally based on a geographic area, so you would actually pinpoint a specific area and then set a radius for all applications for the MSGP within that that
Oh,
circumference.
I see. You provide them your net, and then they would fill it
Correct.
accordingly.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like Claudine was saying, the town clerk is automatically notified whenever anybody within Shelburne applies for an MSGP.
What occasioned the redo, the resetting?
Well, I think these permits just generally expire after a certain period of time, and it becomes incumbent upon EPA to rewrite the permit, so. I mean,
Do the
that's-
conditions change, I mean, substantively from,
So we haven't done a complete compare and contrast against the prior MSGP and this MSGP, but I mean, I think you can expect that there's scientific changes that are going to cause, slight modifications and
Sure.
policy changes that are going to change in the permit. But we haven't done that analysis for you. If you want us to, we can. But I mean, it's a really long permit. Like for example, and this is a copy of the permit. It's probably about 200 pages long with appendices. So it would take quite some time to go through each provision and find out, what's different in the prior permit draft to this one.
questions?
What makes the difference? I mean, could the state decide on its own to issue a site-specific permit rather than coverage under MSGP, or does that only happen if somebody challenges it? Where's the threshold that distinguishes a general permit from a site-specific permit?
So I don't have a great answer for that, but I think generally speaking, I suppose they could, but I think that threshold is probably, is there something particular about a particular use in a particular area that requires something different than is covered under the MSGP. So, I mean, I think that's sort of that. I think it's relatively rare to get these individualized permits as opposed to the MSGP, but it would be for a specific use where you're not gonna, like, for example, one example is that you don't get effluent limitations for all types of materials contained within this general permit. So if you're, for example, if you're discharging something that is particular that may not have an effluent limitation, there may be justification for coverage under a site-specific permit because the generalized permit isn't gonna cover whatever it is that a particular industrial activity is discharging into the ground, into the stormwater. Do you have anything else you'd want to add?
I would just add that it is, as we were saying, a general permit. There are some aspects of that permit that are tailored to individual sites, specifically the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, which is also known as the SWIP. And so the SWIP has to be developed by each site and submitted with their application for the MSGP or their application to be reauthorized under the MSGP, and has to take into consideration a lot of aspects that are unique to the site. So developing, say, a pollution prevention team, a site description, summaries of pollutant sources, and descriptions of different control measures and schedules and procedures that might be unique to that site. So again, although it's called a general permit, there are some aspects that have to be tailored to each site.
Thank you. Any other questions? Lee?
Thank you.
Thank you. We greatly appreciate that. That was, that clarifies what had seemed a little murky on a couple of occasions as a process. But I think it might be useful, Lee, if we were to develop a register, in effect, of how many permits of this kind there are in Shelburne, so we have some sense of the magnitude. And certainly take the steps to become an early to take the steps to be notified in a timely manner for any or all of them. So we appreciate that very much. Appreciate it, Claudine. Christian, thanks. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? Hearing none. The next item is the Kwiniaska Shelburne Heights wastewater flow decision processes and permit reviews. And we're quite aware, of course, that from our usual half dozen folks, we have many more, and the assumption is going to be that you are all here to address that issue, or many of you are. As an introduction to the item tonight.
Jerry, before we start, I need to recuse.
Thank you.
I'm a member of the Shelburne Heights community.
Thank you. You took the words right out of my mouth.
I'll be in the soundproof room if you.
Thank you. Mike's recusing, understandably, as a petition signer at the least.
And Jerry, I should point out that I sat on the DRB during the hearings for the Kwiniaska development. I want to point it out, I don't believe it's a conflict, because I don't have any stake in the outcome, and I'm neutral on the issue, but I want to point that out.
I wouldn't think, would it do any of us think that that's cause? Yeah. All right, the other thing to say is, as an introduction, is that we're not anticipating a decision tonight. Our greatest need at this point is to understand the problem, to understand as well as we can your positions and your feelings and what you think needs and should be done. And those we would of course then spend some time with and return to a meeting, possibly the next one, with some reactions of our own. So this is an opportunity for us to learn from you what you feel the situation is all about. And with that, if there's anyone who would like to speak in first, you're more than welcome. Tony?
First, I don't know if you've seen the actual petitions.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
have copies.
Yeah.
We do.
And then second, did you all receive copies of the finances, the bond,
We do have.
showing over payments over 10 years?
I think,
You did, I've got them here for you.
Let's-
okay. I'm not sure I saw that.
Just in case we don't.
No.
Thank
No, we do. I have it here.
you. Yeah, we do.
I have it here, Tony, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we actually were, as a neighborhood, wanting to focus primarily on the first item in our petition, item A, which is talking about having a qualified engineer, i.e. a wastewater engineer, review and certify that the Shelburne Heights sewer system design can handle the added flow rate and added flow volume of more than double the number of homes going into our neighborhood. Because the reason for that is that what we were told in the early 2000s, around 2001, was that this system was going to be for our neighborhood only. And it's, for that reason, we want to be reassured that it can handle more than just our neighborhood. And I just want to step back a little bit. Someone did point out to us right before this meeting the annotated notes that you were all given in your packets from the town manager. And I would just like to say that much of that is wrong and is quite slanted and biased. But we are not here to focus on the finances of that. We would like to discuss that at another time. We really want to talk about the engineering and the process of that. One of the things, it's worth noting also that at least half of the residents of Shelburne in the early 2000s, when some of the systems were failing and the town was looking at what to do with this, the town actually wanted to bring the sewer up. It wasn't that
there were a few residents that needed it, but it wasn't that the neighborhood overwhelmingly was asking for this. So just to make that point, most of us, more than half of us, had perfectly functioning conventional systems, and the cost of, even if we had to put in a mound system at some point for $15,000, would have been equal to what we are paying to hook up to the town sewer. So it was not a benefit, a financial benefit, that the town did us a favor to require us through a town vote to hook on to the town sewer system. Those of us who were opposed to it because we didn't need it in our neighborhood went along with it for the benefit of our neighbors at a greatly added cost. So, but again, we're not here to talk about the cost of this. I just want to set that straight, because it was not, when we refer to it as our sewer system, it's because that's what it was told, what we were told in the beginning. The initial meeting when it was decided, when it was negotiated, was, I believe, with the water department. It was held at the old town hall, and we had at least as many people from our neighborhood there. The old timers will remember the discussions and so forth. So I just want to establish that. In 2016, Kwiniaska, can everybody hear me? I just realized I'm not really speaking into the mic. So the main thing was that we were told this would not be used as a link to further development. And when Kwiniaska came along in 2016, and the neighborhood was concerned about that and just, wanting to find out more about it, that certainly was raised. We asked that question. The Snyder Development told us, nope, it's going down Webster Road, and the DRB assured us, yes, that is what the plan is, and so everybody was satisfied that that's the way things were going to be. But then this past April, in an Act 250 meeting, my husband Bill just happened to go to that meeting and learned otherwise, and so he's going to share that.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill Supple up on Pearson Drive, and I have a couple of documents to hand out.
Sure, thanks, Bill.
So, as Tony said, we thought the route of the sewer was going to go down Webster Road, as we had originally been, were convinced in 2016. So we kind of tuned out. When I went to the Act 250 meeting, I went because I was concerned about the blasting. So I wanted to kind of find out what the protocol was, because we're an abutting property owner. What's the protocol that's going to be followed? Because we had some issues when the town put in the sewer system that we're talking about. So I wanted to, once bitten, twice shy, learn from experience. So when the developer put up the rerouted sewer, I was kind of taken aback, like, where did that come from? How could this possibly be going through Collimer Circle? And, in defense of Chris Snyder, he said that he wanted it to go down Webster Road, and the town wants it to go through Collimer Circle. So it's, okay, now we have to figure out what happened. So the reason why we're here, like Tony said, is all the people who were in Shelburne Heights when the sewer was being negotiated. And keep in mind that the first bond vote was defeated. So the town came back to us and said, what can we do to push this through? Tony and I were one of the houses up on Shelburne Heights who had a perfectly fine sewer system, as I'd say about half the people did. So the town came back and convinced us that they could, we needed this. Sooner or later, we're going to have to put in a mound system or replace our septic tank. So they sharpened their pencil and they came back with a different proposal, which Tony showed you there. So the reason why we're here is we're concerned because Shelburne Heights residents were told that our system was designed for our use only. Okay? Now, keep that in mind, that we're told it's not going to be used to be a link in a chain for further development. So we have real legitimate engineering questions that if we were told that and it was true, would it be designed to be a link in a chain? So we have a legitimate concern that it might not be designed to handle this. And our concern is the town is making assumptions that it is. And because just from the Kwiniaska development, it's going to be a greater than 100% increase in flow that's going through it now. And because all of us are downstream of that development, any problems are going to show up in our basements. So the documents that I passed out, the town might argue that, don't worry, it's going to work fine. We wouldn't design a system that would fail in this way. They're meant to be linked together. Well, we don't find any evidence that a wastewater engineer has demonstrated that, that's signed off on that. So if you go to the October 11th, 2017 memo from Chris Robinson, you'll see that the genesis of how the Kwiniaska project was rerouted through Shelburne Heights is detailed. So Andy Rowe, the engineer of Snyder Development, Chris Robinson, and some other guy got together at the highway lunchroom and decided to reroute this thing. I don't know if that qualifies as notifying the DRB and being announced and going through the proper vetting procedure. But if you go to item 6 on the second page of that memo, Chris Robinson, the town's wastewater supervisor, says that we need to have the town's engineer review the feasibility of the downstream effects of doing this linkage. So my question is, who's the town's engineer? Is it Chris Robinson? Is he a licensed wastewater engineer? Or is it Andy Rowe, who works for Snyder, is perfectly competent, but works for Snyder? His responsibility ends at the property line of the Kwiniaska development. So I think there's a lot of assumptions being made here that this is okay to hook up. And I don't think it is. And part of what concerns me, I'm not an engineer, but I have some common sense. Where it's being hooked in does not look like it's the ideal node where you would put it in there. It looks like it's just the point of least resistance stuck in wherever the hell it'll go. Common sense says it should be at the top of the hill where the pipe might be bigger and more and wider, not through somebody's backyard at the first person who would give an easement. Now, if you look at, I can draw you
I was going to ask, do we have a drawing?
how ridiculous this is.
Do we have a site plan or drawing
No.
that was provided?
Okay.
Okay.
We'll have to get,
Just as a visual.
Thanks.
Okay, so here's Spear Street. There's Colomer Circle, Potter Place, and then Pearson Drive would be down here. Here's the Kwiniaska development. So it's coming in midway through Colomer Court, which is down here. So it's coming in, and then it's gotta go up a little bit like this, and then it gets into the main line, and then it comes down Potter Place. Is that the most ideal way to do that? Is that how it was engineered? I'd be willing to bet no. That's all we want to know. Is somebody gonna, wouldn't it make sense that it was engineered if, we were deceived and it was engineered to be a link in a chain, then you would design it to come into here. I'm not an engineer. That's why we need an engineer. Why would it come in through this way and then go down? So all we want is a licensed wastewater engineer who will sign off and say that, if this project, the Shelburne Heights project, when Kwiniaska flow starts and its maximized flow is there, that I'll stand behind that this will not fail. That's all we want. Because what we're trying to avoid is a potential environmental event, disaster, and an ensuing public health crisis. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And if we all didn't have the common knowledge and experience of being told that this system was designed for us only, we wouldn't be here. Period. That's our concern. And when you look at, so like I had mentioned, I'm a party to Act 250 for the sewer now. And the second document that I give you, when you the one from Andy Rowe, and Andy asks Chris, does Shelburne Heights have the capacity to handle the Kwiniaska development? Now, what Andy does is he calculates the engineering stuff, right? And then in response, Chris says, yeah, those are the numbers that I get as well. They're very similar, but he doesn't show his work. And how similar are they? And as far as I know, Chris Robinson's not a wastewater engineer. So as of May 20th, there is no independent wastewater engineering report, which I'm going to have to report to Act 250. The reason we're here today is to find out what the select board can do to remedy that situation and reassure us that we're not going to have a disaster. Thank you.
Bill, if you would, I have one question. I didn't follow clearly your discussion about if there had been some anticipation for future hookup.
Right. Well, because
that would have established a point of contact different from the one that's currently proposed. I didn't understand why would that be, and where would that?
Well, you would expect the point of contact to come through Spear Street. So initially, when we were debating the installation of the Shelburne Heights sewer system, no one ever anticipated that the golf course would be developed. Who did? Nobody. The concern was on the east side of Spear Street, that big lot being developed. As if we put in our system, that will be a conduit to develop that. Now it's 5-acre zoning. It would be, dense development would be allowed. So it's just the nature of where that where the Kwiniaska development is entering our system is suspect, because I don't know. It doesn't seem like the ideal place where you would hook it up. You would hook it up on Spear Street. And because we were told our system was a onesie, it's not a a link in a chain, further development, further sewage is not going to be flying through here. We have 3 more houses since it was developed, but basically the neighborhood was established. So there might be, one concern is when the town came back with a lower price for the sewer, maybe things were designed differently. Maybe there were, instead of 8-inch diameter pipe, 6-inch was done. I have no idea. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what happened. Yes?
Bill, have you talked to Chris Robinson?
I haven't. Tony has.
To ask those questions, you know, how big is the sewer pipe and?
Well, I'm not an engineer.
No, but I'm asking you if you've had a discussion with Chris, who I assume is familiar with the development.
Tony has.
Okay. And have you had a chance to ask those questions?
They're irrelevant for me to ask. I'm not a professional. That's the thing, is it doesn't matter if it's 8 or 12 or 20 or 2. It's irrelevant to me. You know, and that's what I'm concerned about, is there's a lot of assumptions being made that this thing is just a plain old sewer system, and you know, hook it up like you normally would, and we'll hope for the best. And that's my concern, is that if you hook it up and the best is not realized, that we're left holding the bag because we're downstream of this huge development. And our belief is that our system is not engineered for that. So we're just asking for a fair shake on this. Just that somebody, an independent engineer who's not connected with the developer and is licensed, comes in and says, you know, I took a look at the as-built plans for the Shelburne Heights sewer, and it's got plenty of capacity. You know, there's not going to be any unexpected phenomena when Kwiniaska is hooked up. Now, some people have odor problems already, and so will 100 extra homes fix that or make it worse? Probably make it worse. So I don't know. And I don't want to be put on the spot to say, well, have you talked to Chris Robinson? Because it's not my job. My job is to pay my taxes and be able to flush my toilet and not have other people's waste come up into my basement. And that's, everybody here is the same thing. And if this was happening in your neighborhood and you had the same history, you'd be up here too talking to somebody else. So,
Bill, I don't mean to get you defensive. I'm just trying to get information because you're asking us to make a decision.
well, I'm
So-
not being defensive. I'm just
Okay.
trying to
All right.
not replicate the same problem that got us here.
Who made the promises to Shelburne Heights that this wasn't going to be a link in the chain?
Whoever the town manager was at the time.
it was the town manager, as far as I remember.
So how many people are here from Shelburne Heights? Okay. How many people have knowledge that we were promised that this was only going to be for our use only?
And we were also promised that anybody that, and if there was anybody else that was hooked in, they would also join the thing and our rates would go down.
What form did that promise take?
That, I don't necessarily remember, it was a number of years ago. He should take the mic and just identify himself
Yeah,
before he
please,
speaks
if you
in the
would.
back.
Would you help us understand what form that promise took?
Okay, my name is Warren Glore. I live on Colomer Circle. What I remember is that at one of the meetings, the person who was the town manager at the time stated that since the town had voted that we had to do it, that we were doing it, and then the town voted that we were going to be paying for it, unlike a couple of the other sewer things that were done at on the same ballot. We were told by him that if any other houses or anything else was joined to our system, that they would be helping paying for it, and our rates would be going down because there would be more people paying for the, towards the, yes, towards the bond.
I'm a little confused, because you were speaking about, you presumed exclusivity.
Well,
But now you're mentioning-
we got lots of little promises that day. There were several lots that had not been built on, and I think there were 3. Yes, 3 houses have been built. We were told that if they were built and joined up, they would be paying for it with us, and that everybody's potential rate that we were paying should go down. My rate hasn't gone down in the whole time, and there's more houses. Not that I expected it to go down very much.
Well, you forgive, but my question had to do with the exclusivity of the neighborhood. Oh,
At the time, the only place that
you were told, you say,
we were told that it
that-
was for Shelburne Heights,
it was a self-contained.
that it was a self-contained thing, and
And these other houses that were added to it are also in the neighborhood?
are also in the neighborhood.
All right. So, but this took no written form.
Not that I remember, but at the same time, are we supposed to believe that we need written things from when we have, it should have been in the records?
Oh, I think if you'll forgive again, the idea here is for us to become as intelligent as we can about
Right,
this problem.
but you're also asking me to
We're not
remember.
implying a judgment, and you shouldn't be reacting in quite that way. We're just simply asking, it would help if we understood what
Okay.
form these promises took, much less by whom, and whether they were carried out in any other respect. And it's history to us. The more we can learn from you, the better the decision-making is going to be.
Okay, so I do not know whether they were written down.
Okay.
But I do know that we were told that our rates would go down as more people joined, and that has not happened. I needed to go through some records for 4 or 5 years ago, and I came across my bills, and my sewer, the special assessment is exactly the same as it was in the bill I got last month.
Of course, the rates would reflect current costs, and it's not likely that rates have decreased anywhere over a period of time.
Well, it's the assessment, the special assessment. We get a special assessment.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. When you said rate, I didn't understand.
Well-
Okay. Okay. Well, that's very helpful. Thank you. We'll ask you, if you would, please, for the sake of the audience who are watching on TV, we ask everybody to give your name.
Ooh, it's so loud. I'm Barbara Glade, and I don't see why they just can't run their sewer system down Webster Road and avoid our neighborhood entirely, because their land goes over to Webster Road.
Thank you.
Our special assessment is $460 a year
Yes.
on top of our water bill.
Okay. I mistook when he said rate. This threw me off a little bit.
Excuse
so-
me, I don't want to hog all the time.
Yeah.
But the reason everyone's here is we all have shared memories. And it's not surprising that the town wouldn't put something like that in writing, because it is very unusual for a town to make a promise. The town, at the time, remember, the first ballot was defeated. So the townspeople decided not to impose this special assessment on the neighborhood, because half the people didn't want it, the other half did. The town came to the people who were against it and said, what can we do to push this through? And I was one of those people. And so I remember these things. Fortunately, everybody here who was in the neighborhood at the time, people who didn't raise their hand are new in the neighborhood, okay? They're being truthful. So, but they've heard that. They're continuing to pay the assessment. And And just to clarify what Mr. Gloria was saying is he was saying that we've added 3 homes to the neighborhood and our bills stay the same. So, and that's been a number of years. So that's another promise broken. So the bigger promise for today is we want to make sure that this thing is not going to become a disaster, an environmental disaster that could be prevented. That's all I want to say.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, I think I have something.
Would you please go to the mic and give us your name and
My name is Linda Chavone, and we live on Pearson Drive. But my memory is at that time that the town was really frightened about development happening on the east side of Spear Street. So if they gave us the sewer, they didn't want that to ever happen, that line would attach to the other side. And so that's why I think that it was designed only for our area. Does anybody else have that memory?
Well,
Do
I
you?
think the sewer service boundary doesn't extend across Spear Street.
No, but
Is
you
that
have
correct?
you have to remember, this
No,
was,
but on Spear.
but it was a long time ago when they didn't want to have development over there. Does anybody else have this memory?
Because that's the rural district.
Right.
Yes.
Spear
Yes.
Street East is
Yep.
where the rural district starts.
But that's the memory I have,
Yeah.
that, okay. I
As
just
part of the
want-
rationale for.
Yes, for making it a smaller system. They
Sure.
didn't want it to expand, so.
thank you. Anyone else like to, sir?
Hi, my name is George Mills. I live on Falmouth Circle also. Two things. We're talking about hooking up another development right now. And I looked at the kind of the general sewer plan, and I'm concerned that not only will this development get connected up and go through our neighborhood, but maybe Beaver Creek and some of those other ones might be also diverted through that neighborhood. So I'm very interested in the way the engineering review goes, and I hope it does go. Because I'm concerned for 2 reasons. I don't want backup in my property, and I remember reading that the town had issues with backups in other Shelburne properties and got sued because they didn't have enough insurance to cover it. I remember reading that in the Shelburne News. So I think it's in the town's interest to make sure this works regardless in that way. The other thing I'd like to say is I was one of those property owners that had a lot back then that wasn't developed, and I have since developed it, and I live up there again. I lived up there at the time of the votes also. And at that time, we were asked to pay just like everybody else. So I've been paying for 20 years, just like everybody else has, or almost 20 years. So I think all those lots had to, so you know.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Noah Dater. This is minor, but I was going through the Act 250 documents, and document number 19 was the town cost analysis. And there were just a couple of things that, I thought were really important here. One, it says, this project will not encumber the wastewater system's present users and will not create a financial burden on the wastewater department. But I think it's the users, that we want to know that that's backed up by something, by some engineering documents. And then the next thing it says is wastewater used will be paid at the same rate as the other residential users. And I think because of, we're not expressly coming here to talk about that assessment and that rate, but it doesn't seem like that's accurate. The users directly downstream who are supporting this system will be paying more than the users that are hooking up to it fresh. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I have one. First, I'd like to hear from Chris Robinson. I'd also like to hear from Snyder or the engineer. I can understand how these folks feel because you all paid for that system and are still paying for it, as I understand it. So there's that issue. I know that's not what you wanted to focus on tonight, but I just wanted to say I understand how you must feel about that. But I do feel like I certainly have a lot of questions, and I'd love to hear from Chris. And my memory is that while we were out, and my memory, I could be off, but because we heard so many, they kind of, I'm sorry to say, all the applications sort of bleed together after a while, but this one stands out because there was so much interest in it. And my memory is that at the end, we changed it from going down Webster Road to going through your neighborhood. That's my memory. And maybe that was at a hearing that folks didn't come to, that was a follow-up for like final plat review. So, to the extent that that's the case, I do feel a little bit badly about it. But Tony, hang on a minute. I really want to hear from Chris, and I want to hear from Chris or Andy.
Can we confirm that? I mean, that's factual, right? There's a DRB approval.
Dean might
that we
know.
can
Do you know, Dean?
Look at, or just so we're all talking about facts and not
Yeah.
what might have been approved.
The initial DRB approval for preliminary plan, which was the partial review, so it's the second of the 3 steps, included a condition on the developer that said when you bring in final plans, those plans need to show the wastewater going north. That was as part of the preliminary plan approval, not final, not
Okay,
the
thank
3rd
you.
step.
What date was that?
If you give me a second, Bill, I will answer that.
Mhm. And Dean, thanks for coming tonight.
So this is still pending before the DRB, correct?
I don't think so. They got their final from the DRB. Now they're in front of Act 250.
Okay.
The decision was signed December 20th of 2017.
Okay, Bill?
Can we
Can we confirm that too? Just the approval status, is there final approval for the project in place?
Yeah,
I'm telling
long
you the
since.
date of the preliminary plan approval, that was when it was of record that the DRB was saying, as part of this project, its expectation was that the wastewater would go north. December 2017.
But then there was
Is that
a final.
incorporated in the
Final
final
plan
It
approval?
was incorporated in the final plan. The final plan
Okay,
application
that's
did
what I wanted to
include the plans going north, and that's how the project was approved.
Thank you.
But that's not how you guys understood that.
Can I talk again? So I thought we had a shorter period of time, so I've got the chronology of the DRB events complete with dates. So on March 16th, 2016, from the DRB meeting minutes, all these things were sent to Act 250, not by me. The conceptual site plan shows the sewer outflow going in Kwiniaska going down Webster Road. December 7th, 2016, DRB minutes, no mention of rerouting the sewer. June 28th, 2017, that's the memo, the duplicate of the memo. For some reason, there were 2 of them, one June 28th, one October 11th. I gave you the October 11th one. This is the memo between the town of Shelburne, Chris Robinson to Caitlin Mitchell, DRB administrator, where they reference the June 21st highway lunchroom meeting, okay? To me, that seems to be where the only official document that the DRB has initiating the change. So my question is, so I kept looking, where in the DRB did they warn about this? How did I miss this? July 3rd, 2017, there's an anachronistic letter. It's out of date. It's occurred after this, from Lambereau and Dickinson to Joe Colangelo, saying that the wastewater is going to go down Shelburne Road. That's after the July 28th Webster Road. So October 11th, 2017, that again, there's a memo from Chris Robinson of the town to Caitlin Mitchell of the DRB saying that I met with, this is a quote, I met with Chris Snyder and Andy Rowe on August 21st to discuss diverting flow north to Collimer Court. Chris S. will contact property owners regarding an easement to access Collimer Court. That's October 11th, 2017. DRB minutes, November 1st, 2017. On page 14, it's the first suggestion in a DRB meeting that the sewer may be rerouted north to Shelburne Heights. There was some language there that we need to check with Chris Robinson to verify that. Never was it discussed or anything. And then Dean saying less than a month later, it's done. It's going through Shelburne Heights. So from November 1st until whatever he's saying, the final document, that's when it had to be advertised, warned, and public comments. No one was there.
Tony?
I just want to answer Mary's question about speaking with Chris Robinson. I did, after emailing you and Jerry, I did speak with Chris, and Chris said that I was welcome to come down and see the plans at the sewer treatment plant, and that, you know, with the width of the pipe and so on, it should be adequate. We talked a little bit about the things we're talking about today, that it, you know, was designed just for our neighborhood and so on. And I mentioned to him, I said, well, you know, I wouldn't understand the plans. I think someone who really understands sewer treatment and wastewater systems would have to look at it. My brother's a civil engineer, and I said perhaps he could come down and look at it. And I asked for a copy of it that my brother could look at it. And he said no, he would have to come into the plant to see it. My brother's been traveling in the Philippines and now Chicago, so he has not had a chance to do that. But, you know, and the more I thought about it, I realized, wait a minute, that is not our responsibility as residents to go in and look at this wastewater treatment plants and reassure ourselves that they are fine. It is reasonable for us to question and want to have it reviewed by an engineer who specializes in that field. And unfortunately, even though Chris is very qualified and talented, he is not. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I don't believe that you are a wastewater engineer. So, you know, all of the math and so on that Andy Rowe was providing him with, you know, he wasn't doing the math. He was just saying, yeah, that's matches what I have. And I'm not questioning that he couldn't do the math. I'm just saying this isn't right. The prudent thing for the town would be to make sure that this is going to work, to not just take a chance and, you know, wing it. And so I think, you know, someone who understands these things needs to look at the as-built, the final design, and make sure that this is going to work, you know. And what Bill was pointing out, you know, we don't know anything about where it comes in, who's going to design, you know, all that flow coming in, you know, what's going to happen when it hits our system. Is it going to go like this, or is there going to be a roundabout, or how is it going to be designed so that there isn't a major disaster? And that is our primary concern. The money thing, you know, we can talk about that. It'd be nice if you know, things were fair. But we really are, this is our home. We don't want to have things, we don't have things bubbling up in our, in our.
I completely get that. And I'm maybe because I was on the board at the time, I do have a recollection of this, and there is a process, and I believe we honored the process. I don't think there was ever a time when a meeting or a hearing before the DRB wasn't properly noticed on this particular matter. It might have been something that got missed because it wasn't fully appreciated by by folks who were receiving the notices, perhaps.
The notices were only going out to the immediately adjacent neighbors.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
at the point that it was talking about the whole sewer for the neighborhood, it really, at that point, was not just the immediately adjacent neighbors. It was the whole neighborhood that was now an affected party and really should have been warned about this.
I can answer Mary's question. Again, sorry. So going back to why the first thing I said is my concern is assumptions are being made. And I think with the Act 250 process, whether it goes down Webster Road or through Collimer Court really should be irrelevant if everything is designed to be linked together. And I think that because the way that those memos are written, it's none of our business. The town's opinion or position is, why do we need to contact the people in Shelburne Heights? Chris Robinson knew nothing about the private deal and the history of this sewer system. We educated him on that. And he said, oh, that's interesting. You know, everybody's learning that, wow, we've made a lot of assumptions. And the assumptions, the assumption that I'm afraid that we're making is that this system is designed to be a link in a chain, and is just like every other system designed to do that. We were told something different, and that's our concern. And if we weren't told that differently, or, you know, to put it bluntly, if we weren't lied to, we wouldn't be here. It just, hey, the development's going in, and personally, I have no problem with that development going in. The only problem I ever had from the get-go was where the sewer was going to go based on what we were told. And it was going down Webster Road. I packed up my bags and I left. You know, some people had issues about the density, whether it was fitting with Shelburne, but I've got nothing against the developer or the engineer. I just want to make sure that there's not going to be some disaster that we could have prevented. And I'm afraid that there's assumptions being made by people on the DRB, innocently enough, because of this is the way it's usually done. The significance of putting it through Shelburne Heights was not appreciated. It was a last minute change. 99 times out of 100, it doesn't matter with the sewer because they're all the same. My concern is our sewer is different.
Thank you.
Do we have any, could I ask, do we have any sense of the cost for that study? Tony, do you guys have a ballpark sense? Has anybody, or anybody else in the room?
Well, I can give you,
Chris?
if you go,
Anybody?
well, I can go to 2002. So if
Today?
you-
Because
No,
we're
the
paying.
document I gave you from the
Okay.
town. It has the engineering cost for for the Shelburne Heights sewer. And it's like $130,000.
This one?
Yeah, if you look like a couple, 3 lines down. The engineering costs,
That's for the PE study? That,
no, for our original sewer.
yeah, I'm trying to get a sense of, for request A, how much are
Well,
we talking about?
If you
Just
hired-
I have no
materiality.
idea.
If you hired a PA, do you have any sense of, no?
Okay.
I mean, maybe Andy.
Well, it's,
If anybody can help us a little bit, that would be appreciated. Are we talking about 25 grand? Are we talking about,
I really want to hear from Chris, and then I want to hear from
Yeah.
Andy, who could probably answer that question.
okay.
Because my recollection is from sitting on the board that the original proposal was to send it down Webster Road, and Chris came before us and he said, I don't like that idea, and here's why. And he sat down with Snyder and Andy, and they came up with this other plan. So there are a lot of competing factors here, all of which I don't recall, but I know there were some. And I know our meetings were properly noticed on this. So Chris.
Yeah, Chris Robinson, Water Quality Superintendent. So when I reviewed the plans.
The original plans.
The original plans, Snyder was planning on going down Webster Road. And it was a cross-country line, which I'm not a fan of, to get there. So I looked at that, and then I also looked at potentially going north. The benefit of going north was that development can gravity flow all the way to the treatment facility. If it goes down Webster Road, it's going to go down to a Webster Road pump station. All that flow is going to get pumped, and it's going to go down and it's going to hit the Route 7 pump station, and then all that flow is going to be pumped again to get to the facility for treatment, which is just drives costs up for users on the system. So I'm looking out for the best interest. I've got a town-owned system down Webster Road. I've got a town-owned system in Shelburne Heights. It seemed like it was the most appropriate way to go is to gravity flow it all. So I met with Andy and Chris to discuss those options. It wasn't what they preferred to do, but it staged the town in the best position for maintenance costs and all that type of stuff moving forward. I ran the calculations because I've got the as-built drawings for that development. I ran the calculations. The shallowest slope is a .004 slope. And I ran what the number was, and it wasn't even close to what it needed to be. It was just a fraction of the design flow for that pipe. And months probably went by before Andy sent me an email. Had to do with the Act 250. And he ran his calculations, and even after the numbers were ran, with both developments using an 8-inch pipe, which is what that development has all the way down through it, and that's what our town specifications require, a minimum of an 8-inch pipe. So even if a 4.5-inch pipe could have served that entire development, that's not the way it's designed. It's designed with a minimum of an 8-inch. That's the way our specifications are set up. So when Andy responded back, the response back was the same result I had, where both developments don't even hit the 50% mark on an 8-inch pipe. And so there's still quite a bit of capacity left and available. So had it been close and I was concerned that we might be running into an issue, absolutely, I probably would have hired Andy probably not Andy because he was working with Chris, but I would have hired somebody to double check my work. But the fact that it wasn't even close didn't rise to the level that we needed to spend money on another evaluation. And then Andy's results, when I responded back to him, I wasn't trying to hide my work or anything. It's when Andy sent me back, and you can talk to my guys because I talked to my guys about the situation. When Andy responded back, I just concurred with him. Those are the same numbers I'm coming up with also, and so that's where we are today.
So what does the two developments together add up to?
You remember that you had the numbers with you? I didn't bring them with me.
What was the question? But I mean, in terms of
Excuse me, you have to identify yourself.
You
as
said
well.
that the one development.
Excuse me, sir. You
I'm
have to
Jason
identify
Lowenthal,
yourself. Yep.
and I live on Morse Drive.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm just wondering, when you said the one development didn't fill up an 8-inch, right? So when you added up the other one, the proposed one, and would it fill it up, or where would it end up?
No.
You said it was under 50%. I'm just curious what percent would fill up.
That's both developments. That's the 73, I think it's 73 homes in Shelburne Heights neighborhood, and the 91 homes, is it, Chris? 91 homes for Kwiniaska.
Doesn't even get to 50%?
Doesn't get to 50% of the pipe.
Hi, Tarnberg, Morris Drive. Can I ask you a clarifying question? Can I do that? Yes?
Sure.
So this October 11th that we also went to the town and retrieved, October 11, 2017, you're talking now about pipe size, but that's not what's mentioned here as a concern. It's the pump stations, and it's the emergency storage issue. And so I guess I'm wondering about, is this a cost savings measure on the backs of others, or is it, because I'm worried about the emergency piece around the disaster too. What happens if it doesn't meet demand? And so I'm wondering about if you can speak to the
So
emergency.
I don't have that document, but I'm assuming it was the Webster Road and Route 7 pump stations that we were looking at. Right now, we have to have a certain amount of emergency storage capacity at our pump stations, or you can have a backup generator on site. Webster Road does not have a backup generator on site, and if we were to go down Webster Road, there could be the potential that there doesn't have adequate storage, and they'd have to put an emergency generator in.
Right, so I guess what I'm asking is, are all storage equal? And is the capacity of that emergency storage issue met with the new demand?
It's not going in that direction now. The plans are to head north to go through Colomer.
Okay,
So it's not going, so
But
it's,
it says actually that the Shelburne Heights does have an emergency later in this document.
no,
No?
no.
It doesn't,
Shelburne
we
Heights
don't have
does-
one?
No,
Okay.
no, it's all gravity
Okay,
flow.
thank you for clarifying.
Well, doesn't one person?
Excuse me, would you? Folks, we've got, the situation is we have a number of people who watch this on TV. And if you don't identify yourselves, they see your back. So it's very important to let them know who you are, and
be at a mic.
we have to keep asking you as well to pick up the mic. I'm sorry about it.
But also, we have someone who takes down and writes out
Yeah.
all the minutes of this meeting, and it makes it really difficult for her if she's trying to guess who
To
is doing the
record
speaking,
when
'cause
we
the-
don't have names,
the
so
written
sorry.
document's important.
Well, one person in Shelburne Heights, Don Condon.
And you are again, I'm sorry.
Linda Chavone from
Thank you.
Pearson Drive. He does have a situation where his sewage is pumped up. Does that cause him a problem? Or that doesn't matter?
It would be less of a problem, actually, because then he's tying into the system with a force main. So,
But how would that happen I'm just standing up for him and this whole situation.
that's an individual, I'm not aware of where that house is, but it's an individual pump station that you'd be speaking of. That only serves his house.
Okay, well.
That is another situation.
Thank you.
Can someone educate us on where things are in the Act 250 approval process?
I'm Chris Snyder, with Snyder Homes. First of all, I can answer your question. We have submitted our Act 250 application. It is under current review, and we're really pending two permits. One is the water supply permit, and the other permit is the wastewater supply permit. So one thing that is going to happen, or has happened, but it's pending, is the engineering review by the state of Vermont about the current proposed system. And I'll let Andy speak to what they look at, but they are the technicians who review and confirm the engineering that is behind the proposed system. So I think there is somebody who is going to be doing the study. If the town wants to do their own study as well, that's fine, but the state is also doing a study and does a thorough project review of that. The other piece that I'd like to comment on is the public process. And I have been through many hearings and many new neighborhoods, and I can tell you that this process has been long, it's been fruitful, it's been very public. We have been in front of the DRB for, I think we counted it, over 16 times over 4 years, or it was a very high number, higher than what I normally see. And during the public process, there are changes that happen at every meeting. And sometimes it comes from the town, sometimes it comes from the DRB, sometimes it comes from neighbors. So there are changes throughout these processes, and really it's important for everyone to note that during each presentation there are modifications and there are submissions, but there's also at those primary submissions, so both at sketch, preliminary, and final, we do notify people, and as public information that we put out there, and those plans were out there for presentation. So I think it's important to note those couple of things. I would confirm, really what happened in terms of this process. We did have a meeting with Chris Robinson a couple of times, but in general, the goal was, hey, we're looking at long-term costs associated with the potential sewer connection of the neighborhood, and that we are looking at trying to not add more capacity or flow to the south. And so our focus has been going to the north. And, it's not an inexpensive path for me. So there are easements and challenges associated with it that we had to pursue, and it did take us a while to achieve that requirement from the town. So to go north. So
You have to get an easement over someone's property?
yes, that's correct. So it's not just, oh, willy-nilly, just go figure it out. It was, we had to go get an easement, and also had to make sure that the engineering worked appropriately. And so there were only a certain couple of locations that we were going to be able to connect into that line. So it's not willy-nilly about how it's connected into the system. So just thought I'd also present that. And then I do have
Thank
Andy.
you, Chris. Andy, do you want to review for us the procedure, the state procedure?
Sure. So my name's Andy Rowe with Lemro and Dickinson. Our firm is working for the Snyder Companies on the civil engineering associated with this project. And as Chris described, the whole point of going north, there was no advantage to the neighborhood to go north. The project requires a pump station within the neighborhood, whether it went to the north or to the south. When we first met with Chris Robinson, it was presented as the best long-term solution for the town was to go to the north and have sewage flow by gravity all the way to the northern treatment station, as opposed to going to the south and going through 2 pump stations in its way to reach the southerly town treatment pump station. As Chris said, there's 2 permits outstanding with the state. One relates to water supply, the other relates to both water supply and wastewater disposal. However, given the state's current review of the wastewater system, they rely heavily upon the consulting engineer, myself, and the town. They will not be doing a detailed review. They do look and ask questions regarding the capacity of the existing system. But if the town was interested in undertaking a review, it would be a much more detailed review than the regional engineer would undertake. Those are.
Sorry to interrupt. The state does not do an independent review. They rely on your.
They rely upon the
findings.
information that's submitted, and they require that the consulting engineer and the town both comment on the capacity of the system. And at this point, both entities have commented to the regional engineer. They won't be doing an exhaustive review, as was suggested, looking at the record drawings and doing a hydraulic analysis of the existing system in its capacity. That information's been provided to them, and just based upon the way the permitting process works, the regional engineer doesn't get into an exhaustive study. Ms. Kehoe
Is that
asked.
the case for every project, or is that they look at sort of the current state based on those items you just identified? And
No, that's a typical review.
Okay.
Would they do
So
it
it's
advanced?
on the papers, so to speak. They're not really.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, they're looking for the record to be complete, but they're not doing a hydraulic
Their own
analysis
assessment.
is what's suggested.
What would the cost be to do a thorough review?
It would really vary, depending on what information the town might have, looking at some of the downstream segments. If it was just looking at Shelburne Heights, down to the point where it connects in the Northside Drive area, it's certainly not 100,000, not even 10,000. I think it's probably in the under $5,000 range and could be well under that. There's not a very large area to look at in terms of complexity of the system.
Well, the concern being presented to us tonight isn't from North Road on. The concern is, we were told this was just going to be an independent system, not a link in a chain. So I would think it would be prudent or necessary only to look at the capacity of the Shelburne Heights system to handle the additional flow of 91 homes.
Agreed, and that's why I don't think that it's a very complex or costly analysis that would need to be done. It's a fairly discrete area that you're looking at, a fairly defined area to analyze. Again, it's not a large undertaking, I don't think.
Do you have a sense of, assuming an engineer is available and can get going, how long that sort of exercise would take? Just trying to get a sense
10
of
days
how
to
that
2 weeks,
overlays
maybe?
with your current Act 250 review timeline and.
10 days to 2 weeks. Again,
Okay.
it kind of depends on availability, but again, I don't think it's a terribly complex analysis. It is complex, certainly in the interests of the town and the neighborhood, but it's not a large undertaking in terms of the scope of the study.
What if the review concluded that there was substantial risk? What would be everybody's next step?
I think we would have two options. One, if there's a discrete location where there is an issue, that particular section or segment of pipe or manhole or whatever the bottleneck might be could be looked at in terms of providing additional capacity. The other option would be to go to the south. As Chris Robinson had described, there's disadvantages of going in that direction, but that's also another option.
I mean, would the Act 250 process be pending?
If we were to redirect the flow of the sewage to the south, or have a location that needed additional work in order to create or confirm the capacity that is needed, it would delay issuance of one or more state permits, which would sort of have a domino effect and push Act 250 back. Act 250 won't act until all of the other state permits are in place.
The water supply and the wastewater disposal.
Correct.
That's helpful. Thank you for the background.
If there are no more immediate comments, I'd like to make an observation. You've petitioned us to address 4 problems. And my colleagues and I, I'm sure, would value any commentary that anybody would like to make on several of those that have not been addressed. It's understandable that we focused on one, and that was your preference at the start. But if there's anyone who'd like to address the questions of indemnification, or the question of just restitution, and even any further, there's been some incidental mention of notification, but if there's anyone who could help us better understand your view and concerns about either indemnification or just restitution, this would be a very good time, if not the best time, to hear from you.
I want to address the second item, which was primarily if the town did not do the first step, having an engineer review the system and went forward as things are now, we would want some sort of guarantee from the town that if the worst happened, that the town would cover our expense for that, because it was, the town's decision not to do the engineering study, and it was the town's, decision to change the route to go this way. And that was simply it, that, if the worst happens, what do we do? Who do we file a claim with? Is the town going to take responsibility for this, or are they just going to say, you can hire this cleaning company, you can, go use your homeowner's insurance. So that was kind of, it should have been worded differently, that, if A is not met, then B, what?
Or if there's an outstanding capacity question or issue.
Exactly.
Then you're raising B as kind of a subset.
If the town moves forward in wanting this done.
So it's not independent of it, because in a sense, Tony, everybody on a system would love to be indemnified.
Right.
So,
No, it was if the town moves forward without the engineers.
Appreciate that. That's a big help. Would anyone else like to talk about the issue of indemnification or just restitution?
I'm Robin Jeffers, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the money. Whoops.
You can hold it, if that's not, if you.
All I wanted to say was that it's not wholly unusual to ask for some money back when there's a newcomer coming into an existing system, especially in this case where the system is not yet even fully paid for. It's very normal in the course of action and development for someone who is new going to attach to an existing system, one that's new, again, not paid for yet, to ask for compensation for that. I also found, just in going through the staff notes, that the differential between the 50% cost that these people were asked to bear, and they're now actually being charged between 70 and 71%, is an interesting differential. And I don't know quite how that should be resolved, and I don't know that it could be resolved at this meeting, but it seems to me that it should be resolved for those folks. And then, as far as notification goes, just again, when the staff notes, it commented about how could they keep up with people to keep them apprised of what's going on. And I understand that abutters do need to be notified, but I also thought that there was such a thing as party status. And if anybody came to any of the meetings about this, that they would then be on a list to be continually notified of all the upcoming meetings and the changes that were taking place at those meetings, so that they could be apprised and educated and that they could attend.
If you'll permit, I'm a little confused about the 50% and the 70%. Is the 50% your reflection on the idea that the capacity would be only half used?
No, that
Where is the 50%?
original agreement was that the owners at Shelburne Heights would pay 50% of the cost of the project. And in fact, it appears that they're being assessed 71% of the project.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
But Chris?
So our ordinance does spell out that any extension of a sewer line to serve any residents or projects is borne 100% by the users of that system. So, well, sort of like with Snyder's project, Snyder's paying for all of his infrastructure to be put in. Town's not paying for any of that. So it's kind of, I understand you got current residents versus a new project going in, but the way the ordinance is spelled out is all users on that system, whenever there's a sewer line extension, is paid 100% by those users. As far as Shelburne Heights, 70% was covered by the users, 30% was covered by the town, but the town also waived over $300,000 in allocation fees that should have been paid to the town for taking up the capacity in the wastewater treatment facility. So
And the
that was
town pays the
also
and the
waived.
Town pays the O&M as well.
Correct.
Would anyone else? Bill?
Tony.
I think it's important that you address your questions up here.
Bill Supple, Pearson Drive. So we thought we were expecting a short meeting tonight, so we didn't want to burden you with the money aspects of this, but since it's come up. So when it's all said and done, each of the 77 Shelburne Heights sewer users will have paid $9,241 to build the sewer. Each one of us has a unique connection fee that we had to pay independently based on how far we are from the road. Our cost was, I think, $6,000 or $7,000 upfront to a subcontractor to connect to the town sewer. And on top of that, we get the privilege of paying a quarterly bill for sewer use. Keep in mind that half the neighborhood, including me, had a perfectly functioning septic system and tank that I pumped once every 3 years for $200. So the cost for me to hook up to this system is astronomical and ridiculous. And that's half the people. Now, if someone else comes in and wants to piggyback and leapfrog on the back of the people who have paid for this system, somebody has to pay. And that's the fair thing to do. And I didn't want to get into this tonight, but that, assuming that you do this, the engineering system, and everything is fine, and we have a third party tell us it is, I'll be happy with the potential risk to my house and to the neighborhood. The next step is who's going to compensate us for allowing this development to go in, when you could easily go down Webster Road, avoid the the potential engineering problem and not have to have 77 people really upset that they feel they're being taken advantage of.
Thank you, Bill.
We can talk about nickels and dimes, and we can have, I read the annotated notes that you were provided by the town manager, and my reaction was they're somewhere between misleading, inaccurate, and highly biased. The idea that you didn't charge us something is a logical argument for that we're getting a deal is garbage. That's the nicest word I want to say about that. That we are getting a deal from the town of Shelburne on this system is a total farce. We're getting screwed, totally. Right. And my first concern is that it works. When you hook this up, that we don't have a disaster. My second concern is to make it fair. Thank you.
I just want to go on record, Tony Supple, that if that is accurate, that it was after our system was built that the ordinance went into effect saying that, you know, we didn't pay that is moot, because that ordinance saying that we should pay, you know, anyone that is added has to pay that was not in effect at the time that our you know, neighborhood system was built. So I just want to make that point.
No, thanks, Tony.
So,
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to any of the 4 requests you've made?
Yeah, this is Noah Dater. This is maybe for you, Chris. I'm just curious if at any point when you were talking about connecting into our neighborhood, did you discuss the fact that we were still paying for a sewer system and that it was a private-public partnership essentially to create it?
No, because it's a town-owned system. And just like Kwiniaska is going to put in their development, they're going to pay for all that infrastructure. They're going to turn that over to the town a year after they're complete, right? And you get a warranty. Then it gets turned over to the town. If somebody on Spear Street, on the west side of Spear Street, wants to tie into that system, they're not going to have to reimburse Chris Snyder to be able to tie into his system. It's a town-owned system at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Would anyone else like to speak? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your coming. We've learned a great deal, obviously. We have more to learn and more to consider, and we'll certainly make every effort to make sure you know when we next address this, if it's not June 11th. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the wastewater treatment plant options, the continuing discussion, and Lee is going to address, is going to note for us that we are still not at a point of decision-making, and he may want to describe briefly why.
Should we give it a minute?
Yeah.
Chris, do you want to turn the projector on if you want to show that?
And the item, once again, is number 11, which is a continuing discussion tonight of wastewater treatment plant options. Chris and Lee, for background, met with South Burlington today, and I believe their presentation is going to be based largely on what they learned and what we can expect at our next meeting.
So, as you know, from a year ago and much more recently, we're looking at the potential need for some significant expenses to either upgrade our own wastewater treatment facilities or potentially select option 4, which would be converting those plants to pump stations and shipping it to the city of South Burlington. The engineers had done cost analyses of the capital costs and the likely operations and maintenance costs going forward. not only for the initial changes that might be needed, but actually looking even to the next upgrade at least 20 years further out. A number of questions were raised, as you noted. Chris and I met with the city today to try to get some clarity on a few key issues. I'll give you some of those answers as best as we can in simple form. So, as we knew, it would be really helpful for the city to know by June next month if we'd like to join in with them on the engineering analysis they need to do anyway. Choosing to do that does not bind us to any financial costs at this point. They need to do the study anyway. They can include that in their analysis. They don't need to charge us money. We don't need to budget money right away. They would need to know by fiscal year 21-22 for certain whether we want to join in and actually be a partner with them in this wastewater increase.
So by next July.
So I think,
August
Yep.
of 2020.
so right now it's kind of a, right, so right now it's kind of a conceptual decision. Would we like to move forward? It's great news. As far as what they might charge as user fees, they would charge us the same rate they charge all their users, which right now is less than half of the rate that we charge our users for actual usage on the system. They have the economies of scale, obviously, much larger user base to spread those costs over. If we all went through the engineering analysis, if we agree a year plus out that we really want to do launch with them, we spend some money with them, and then we bail out, we would have to reimburse them for some proportional cost of that engineering study, but we wouldn't be on the hook permanently to tie in if we didn't want to do that. Future capital costs would be shared purely on a proportional basis. If hypothetically we were taking up 30% of their capacity, then we would be paying 30% of any future capital improvements to the system.
So it's based on percentage of...
Be based on a percentage of flows. And if we were to partner with them or be a customer of them, we would be buying and be guaranteed in perpetuity a certain amount of allocation. So it's not like we'd be buying allocation for 20 years and then they'd say, sorry, we need it for ourselves, you're on your own, and then we're really stuck, having spent money to convert our plants, build a force main, and now we're out of luck.
It's almost like shared ownership.
In a sense, we'd be buying a permanent allocation of their
We'd have
plant.
some agreed escalator for that over time.
And it could include
really
that.
important given some of the history with
Sure.
the tank.
I mean, they've been very good partners on other projects. Obviously, life can change, staff change, but we'd be buying a permanent allocation and there would be a contractual agreement to that effect.
So when you do build a facility like that, it's typically for a 20 to 25-year life cycle. So the next time that time comes around, if needed, you would upgrade that facility for the additional capacity that the town was going to need at that facility to move through the next 20-year cycle.
So, again, they're quite willing to work with us, whether we would purely be a customer or technically a partner. They're quite open to whatever form of contractual arrangement we feel more comfortable with.
That was one of the things that we discussed, the form of the relationship.
Right.
Whether it was just simply a customer agreement or whether we would have equity in some form.
Is there an advantage to the latter?
Well, assurance that you'd always have capacity.
Yep.
I mean, that's one, those, they reflect each other. That's a question of...
Yeah, it's not a decision we need to make
Yeah.
here. And the good news is there are several other examples in the county. Colchester currently contracts with the city. Williston and Essex, have agreements. So it's not like this is brand new territory for one municipality to be buying capacity from another.
Well, I think that
seems like it's worth-
very, very, good. I'm sorry, Lee.
Sorry. I mean, I think it feels to us like it's worth saying, yes, please include us in the engineering analysis.
Yeah,
At
no,
this point, it doesn't bind us to any financial obligation. It gives us an option. We're not at a point where we need to decide tomorrow what we do with our plants. But from a cost perspective, whether we like all of the ramifications, we're not sure yet. But from a cost perspective, this is clearly the least cost approach.
I think that sounds very promising, and
From both the CapEx and go forward.
Yes.
Run rate, user fee. Great.
There were a couple of things in the Colchester thing that I noted, by the way. I would expect we would have a much more relaxed provision for building your facility should that occasion rise in 3 years. I thought that was pretty harsh. And they went 40 years, so you're suggesting it would be life of plant, so maybe the agreement has got a 25-year, but I'm assuming they'll build in some stage set of reviews. I mean, they won't wait, obviously, that period of time. What in the estimate of, especially you, Mary, and Jamie, who have the professional expertise, should this agreement to participate take a legal form?
When should it take legal?
You know, a letter of
Sure, a letter
some
of
legal
intent.
consequence that lays out.
Usually you do a LOI and then a memorandum of understanding after that.
Is that something we can get Brian and somebody working on in anticipation of a decision next? You're anticipating a final decision June 11th?
I think that would be helpful for us, so we don't have to keep
Sure.
talking about it, and for the city to know just where
Sure.
they're headed. So hypothetically, if the board were inclined, we could have a letter of intent prepared for the next meeting, understanding there might be a follow-up memorandum of understanding about what that agreement really means and what it means to be participating in that engineering study.
Are we all agreed to direct Lee to do such?
And we'll have Brian here at the next meeting for another issue, so if we wanted him here for that as well.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, there was, just one quick thing, there was some discussion about timing of bond to move forward. That was, if we have to make a final ultimate decision by August of next year, that this is what we want to do, I'd hate to get into too deep into the weeds with the engineering, where you're hundreds of thousands of dollars into it, and then for some reason a bond fails. And then we're just kind of left hanging.
Well, and you remember we talked about I. I think the
Yeah.
thing that, one of the most pleasing things about this to me is that it gives us maybe a 6-month runway to do some serious I reduction, so that we're in a much better position to judge our actual flow. It seems like we may be buying a little bit of time with that we can discuss. But as we've all been talking, we will come to some basic decisions later this summer on capital burden.
Jerry,
So
what's I and I?
infusion and you know,
Oh, okay.
we bill, the bottom line.
Sorry, I'm on septic,
The
so.
bottom line understanding is that for every gallon that goes through our system, we bill for only half.
Every gallon that goes through- Oh, right, because the other is the.
We have a lot
yeah,
of stuff.
We talked about that. That was
Yeah.
part of my lesson.
So if we go to South Burlington and say our figures are, we're promoting a half of our flow, for which we're not, now we're paying twice. So, and what we've been kind of talking about, I know Lee and Chris are talking about, is greatly upgrading or accelerating an I assessment, such that in a relatively short period of time, we get a pretty good understanding of what we got. So that if we went and committed to South Burlington, we would have basis for reducing the commitment from our present flow, which is half water. And this may allow us the opportunity to do so. That's subject to a lot of further discussion. But
I'm sorry, I'm
yeah.
sort of missing this, and I know it's late, but is this because we have a mixed system? We have stormwater and,
So the problem is, whenever you have a series of pipes, sometimes you have leaks. So in a sewer system, you might have groundwater flowing in through a break in a pipe that's not actual sewage. Or people may have sump systems in their basements that are unlawfully pumping into the sewer system instead of pumping out in the backyard.
I see,
And we need a systematic assessment of where that's occurring and to what degree. That would be system-wide, that would be quite a multi-year.
And we need
Yeah.
this before we can tell.
No,
South
the
Burlington?
idea was that we would be much more intelligent about what we were committing to with South Burlington if we had some basic data, basic understanding that we might be willing to say at least 10%, maybe 15 or something of that order. And over the period of the analysis, we might, a year, if we made a real effort, we might come back in a year and say, we definitely are 50-50. So we're only going to commit to 1/2 the gallonage that we're showing now. If we had to commit this next week or 2 weeks, we'd be without that opportunity. That would be, seemed to me to be a real risk.
But when we
you know.
make that commitment, we're only gonna commit to half. Does that mean we've figured out where the inflow is coming from and we fixed it?
Or we're fixing.
If we're able, yeah, if we put the resources to it, yeah.
We'll be running parallel paths in a little bit, in a sense.
Yeah.
The question I would have in that case is, what's the cost to fix it? I realize fixing it makes sense, but nowhere have I seen any of those numbers up on the screen.
Right.
And we don't know, really.
No, but you either pay it on the treatment side,
Yeah.
right? So you look at these
Right.
numbers,
Oh, I see.
and what would be nice is if we don't have to design Bartlett's Bay
For all of that.
to take that entire flow,
Gotcha.
then our cost
Understood,
would
yeah.
go down. So the return on investment should be fairly decent. But
And it didn't look like, even as short as a week ago, that we'd have time to do
Oh,
any
and
of
now we
this,
do. Got
because
it.
the commitment was, the deadline, the drop dead date was early, mid-June, and you had to make a decision. Now, it looks as if we could have the time, and adjunct to the discussion June 12th, but maybe a little later, you may want to invite Chris back and talk about that as a separate matter. And the other thing is the capital burden. We talked about, we would have a much better sense this summer, so we wouldn't be, we could factor this in, just for prudence sake, so that even though the decision-making is a year away, we could factor it in as a known, we have known quantities and known numbers, so.
I think having a good assessment of the system and having somebody that deals with that type of stuff with I&I can actually go through, evaluate your system, and come back and say, this is where you really should be. Because engineering always incorporates some I&I in your
Yeah.
system, but this is where you could be, and those numbers might be able to drive what we want to do in South Burlington.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
then because it's going to be 7 or 8 years before this transpires, we've got this time to actually start knocking that
Yeah.
down, so.
So when we actually send stuff, it would be, these numbers are gonna change markedly at that point.
Yeah.
So,
The good news is that doing the infiltration assessment and trying to make those repairs is helpful no matter which strategy.
Yeah, sure.
Because either we're paying to treat
Yeah.
it here, or we're paying someone else to
meanwhile, we're
treat
running
it
a
there.
system for-
In the meantime, we're
yeah.
running a system.
yeah,
And we're not, the
Yeah.
bills are not covering the cost because we've got too much extra going in that shouldn't be
that's
there.
great. I think that's really good news.
So the water system tries to minimize that, sewer system tries to minimize that.
Well done. Any questions?
Have we ever done an assessment? I guess not.
Well, I think it's ongoing. We do this smoke testing on
Yeah.
occasion to determine where some of these
Been
leaks or
situational and,
unlawful
yeah, it hasn't been
connections are.
system-wide.
So it is an incremental approach.
Yeah.
Okay.
What we've been finding, just to give you some background, what we've been finding is the town system is fairly good shape and pretty tight. Most of our I&I, most of the water we're getting into our system is on private property. So it's people's service laterals, sump pumps, those types of things. We found roof drains tied right into our system, things like that. So, and that just gets to be problematic because you're dealing one-on-one with homeowners, and it's a resource drain.
And it's got the auxiliary value in stormwater mitigation programming, because that's a reduction on the first end.
Right.
So it would be, I think it would be super for us to have as good a handle as we can get in a reasonable period of time at a reasonable cost on what we got. So, well, that's very, any other discussion? Bill?
A couple questions. Bill Supple, Pearson Drive. Never thought I'd be talking about sewer systems. You mentioned the engineering analysis. Do you know what that entails?
What they usually do is they'll go in and they'll set up flow monitors in manholes in strategic locations, and they'll actually, during a rain event, see how everything reacts, whether it's instantaneous, it's slow, and all of that, and then they just work their way upstream
But
to try to
on
pinpoint
a
where
higher
they're-
level explanation, is it safe to say it's to see if the Shelburne system will mesh with the South Burlington system, broadly speaking? Is that what you're saying?
No, what this is just to look and see how we can reduce the amount of flows that we have going through our pipes today.
So it's a Shelburne
Chris is talking
analysis.
about
Yes.
I&I,
Just-
Bill.
just-
You're talking about the study that South Burlington is going to do to fashion a plant, are you?
No, just when you
Oh.
hook up the Shelburne system to the South Burlington
Right.
system, are you gonna do a study to make sure that's gonna work?
Yeah, that's part of the.
Oh, that's
Okay.
part of what we're discussing,
Okay,
yeah.
it's just relevant based on our
Yeah.
previous thing.
Yeah.
And then finally, the economy of scale disclosure is interesting, being half the rate of Shelburne. It's just interesting that as new properties come online in Shelburne, our rates only go up. Sewer rates. Just wanted to make that observation. So
That's why-
Good observation.
you're on septic, right?
Yes,
Sewer
I
only
am.
goes up.
Yeah, I understand that, and it's a real problem, but right now, we're all living in a town that has a giant anachronism in it. We have 2 sewage treatment plants. And we have 2 sewage treatment plants because there used to be fire districts. So those are big costs, and they're both at the end of their lifeline. And there's only 4,000 people who are benefiting from that in the town of Shelburne. So what we've been doing here for the last year plus is looking at, with Chris's help, a more reasonable way to deal with our wastewater treatment so that it doesn't keep going up.
Right, and that's commendable.
Thank you.
So what these are separate refurbishing one plant, refurbishing another plant, consolidating the 2, our own 2, and finally, number 4, shipping it all to South
Right,
Burlington.
so
Yeah.
Shelburne has structural reasons, limitations where economies of scale
Yeah.
benefits are not realized.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, I'd love to be on sewage, but I'm at the end of Harbor Road, and
Well, we could trade.
well, it's never gonna come out my way,
Yeah.
ever.
And we're also in the process now of revisiting a municipal utility. So all of this is
Right.
very much in front of us and really interconnected,
Yeah.
which is not meant to be upon.
Okay, thank you.
It seems to me, I don't know if we've formalized it, but this is a project that we should appoint a select board liaison. Or I know you've been working on it closely with Don and others, but at some point, I think we should formally designate someone. I'm not pointing fingers
Yeah.
or putting my hand up, I'm just saying this strikes me as a project.
Let Mikey do it. Yeah.
We need someone to sit in on some of those
Let Mikey do it,
meetings
it
with
all
South
flows
Burlington.
downhill, Mikey.
Like a sewer system.
Yeah. You said it, I didn't. Yeah, I think this is emerging. Lee would probably agree, and Chris, it's emerging it's emerging as one interconnected series of 3 or 4 projects or concerns, and it's probably best handled that way for reasons of economy of time and effort. I mean, sometimes it can maybe be a little confusing, but I think if we do handle it that way, then we're going to make the best use of everybody's time and energy here. So I suspect maybe that's a direction in which we're headed. Any other comments, ideas, suggestions?
We did have this asterisk as a decision item, but.
Possible decision item.
Yeah.
It could have been, we didn't,
No.
we're sure, I'd rather note it, and perhaps it's not,
But I mean, I
Yeah.
get the feeling we're all the same, similar.
Well, I think the stage is now to review the letter of commitment
Yeah.
and make sure we're satisfied with that for sure. And then any other technical questions or any that you have that you communicate to Lee, by all means, and then come back with a decision on the 11th, which would incorporate the agreement itself, so.
Sounds good.
Okay, everybody set? Next item is number 12, which is a wastewater allocation for Fiddlehead Brewery tasting room. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion to that effect?
Could we have a little background on this? Do we?
Chris?
I don't know what I'm voting on.
Oh, sure. So,
Yeah.
Fiddlehead Brewery is looking to expand. And they also have a wastewater treatment facility that had failed, and they're putting a new wastewater treatment facility in. But because of their expansion and their growth, they're looking at some additional flow.
Are they gonna subject their malt or whatever it is to treatment nevertheless, or are we gonna get that?
Well, they pre-treat it
Yeah,
to where it's down to below residential
so
household
this will be
strength.
pre-treated?
Yes,
yeah.
it's all pre-treated.
Is that the full percentage of their discharge that they're asking for, or they're?
No, so what they do is, right now, I think they have, I'm gonna say 3,500 gallons a day that they're able to discharge to us. Their brewery's growing, and they need more discharge to our system, so.
What, did you already ask this? What percent is the incremental of the total?
But is that above and
What's
beyond
the-
3,500, right?
What's
That's
the
above
current-
and beyond, that's additional.
Ooh,
Of
so
what?
it's 100%.
So it's
plus.
120%
Yeah.
increase, okay.
Isn't that good? Because the more flow, this goes to Bill Supple's point, the more people
Exactly.
on the system flowing in, it's gonna
The more
help.
revenue that the utility brings in.
Are they expanding their pre-treatment? They have to, would they not have to?
Well, they're putting a whole new one in right now.
Oh, okay.
The first one failed, and,
Oh,
yeah, and the company went bankrupt, and so they pretty much have abandoned
oh,
the old system. They're gonna utilize it for some tankage and stuff, but they've abandoned it. And you'll see those silos that they've got in front of their building right now. There's 3 of them set up in a pad. Yep. Yep.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that will be part of their treatment process. It's an
Oh, I didn't know that.
anaerobic process. It's very similar to what Magic Hat uses.
oh.
What's just for my own reference, at what point does somebody have to seek special request for allocation of wastewater? Why does this have to come before the select board?
That's a good question. So the ordinance requires that whenever anybody needs additional allocation, which they're paying for that allocation for the for the treatment of it, they have to come to the select board.
And regardless of whether it's a business or a private citizen?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. So right now, we have a wastewater, or a wastewater allocation ordinance. And that allocation ordinance spells out how much we can give over a 3-year period. So what I do is when a request comes in, I look and see whether or not we have the available capacity, whether it's residential or non-residential. And then there's only certain percentages you can give to just one entity, stuff like that. So we look at all that, make sure they meet all the qualifications, and then you get to see it.
Okay, great.
Move to approve an additional allocation of 4,253 gallons per day of wastewater capacity to Fiddlehead Brewery.
Colleen moves to approve.
I'll second.
Mike seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. The next item is the Regional Conservation Accord. You'll recall that this was presented to us some time back, and we had some questions. Those have been answered, and some, the answers are reflected in it, I noticed.
Dean put some work into this, brought a revised version back to the working group, who agreed to make a number of changes. One in particular that was of concern here was whether signing this, what was really intended as an informal working agreement, did it commit the town financially in any way, and there's an explicit statement that it does not. The reason the group is proposing such a working agreement is they believe that it just kind of puts forth a construct for the group And also in applying for funding grants, it's often helpful to have a formal demonstration that multiple parties are working together towards shared common goals.
And who will be signing this, you or Dean? Does it
Whoever
give a
you
preference?
wish.
My understanding is that if the select board would consider delegating one of their members to sign it,
rather
that would
have
be
a board
preferred. The chair of the South Burlington City Council has signed their version. I'm not sure if that got forwarded. I'm assuming the copy was included in your packet, the blank version. So Helen Reilly signed the South Burlington version end of last week or early. They didn't meet last night, but it's fresh. They just signed it, and it was Helen Reilly, the chair of the board.
But there are really two questions here. One is who's representing us in the group, and the other is who's signing it.
Right, and I understood the question having to do with signing,
Yeah.
but in terms of representation, Gail, Albert, and I have endeavored to attend all of the meetings.
Yeah.
I've made all of them. I believe Gail has made most of them,
Yeah,
and we would continue on that track.
yeah, I think it'd be
Unless-
our expectation that you would, and what's your? In terms of, and in terms of signing?
Let's have you sign it.
Whoever you
Okay.
feel comfortable
Move
with.
to approve the Champlain Valley Conservation Partnership Agreement as presented and authorize the chair to sign.
Moved by Jamie, seconded by Colleen. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye, and those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, thank you. The next item is to reappoint Bob Lake for a statutory term as health officer beginning July 1 for the statutory term, right? Moved by Colleen, seconded by Mary. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Bob.
The next item is an executive session to consider the town manager's probationary period. As is our practice, there are two motions in introduction.
I would move pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313 to find that premature general public knowledge regarding the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage, and so therefore go into executive session for that reason.
Mary moves, Colleen's seconded. Any discussion? Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
And then I would further move pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313 to enter into executive session regarding the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer.
Mary moves, Colleen seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. I would say 15 minutes. Executive session and resume the general session. Moved by Colleen, seconded by Mary. Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Is there a motion?
To adjourn? Yeah.
Wait,
Do
no,
we need to-
it's
Oh, it's
motion,
two, right, sorry.
To recognize
I
that
don't
the
know if
town
that is a
manager's
motion.
probationary period has expired.
yes,
So
that's stated.
Moved by
I think
Mike.
it's- Okay.
Seconded by Colleen.
Okay.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and congratulations to Lee,
Yay.
who's no longer probationary.
No longer.
Off probation. Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah,
Mary moved
Second.
already. And
it was pending.
All in favor?
Colleen, all in favor, aye. Thank you very much.